And welcome back, adventurers, once again to Let's Play ChäoS Child. In the last episode, Takuru and Sarika gathered up what little courage they had and finally entered the real crime scene over at Fairy Dance Love Hotel, room 305. And there they found a murder victim, the third in the new-gen crimes. But there were also two other people there as well. A police officer who was knocked out, the partner to the police officer who was frantically calling for backup downstairs, and also a girl dressed in a uniform that may or may not have been connected with Hikio Academy. But shortly afterwards, the detective in charge of investigating these new-gen crimes, Detective Shinji, had arrived on the scene and was in the process of trying to interview Takuru and Sarika, initially to no avail. Given the circumstances, that's not surprising. But even a detective of Shinjo's caliber needs outside help. And so it is that he has actually solicited the aid of none other than Katsuko Momose, the head of the Frisia Investigations Company that investigated the original New Gen Madness and the Third Melt Earthquake back in 2009. But now we're back here in Hikio Academy, and we're in the cafeteria. And I had to re-record the first part of this episode. Rather, I'm re-recording the first part of this episode because I had my microphone turned off by accident.
壁砲ボットのネタ画像でしょ。でっかいウーパがドヤ顔して光るように座って渋谷も変わったとか言ってる。
Yeah, we get a couple new tips here, but since I'm re-recording this part, I have to check in manually. But we have two tips. The second tip that was mentioned is one that should be very familiar to Steins Gate and Steins Gate Zero enthusiasts. Upa, a ball-shaped mascot character from the popular manga Rainet Karaku, which began running in Rococo Comics in 2006. The anime version only increased its popularity, and large amounts of merchandise such as stuffed animals followed. Now with that said, one might think that Upa's popularity might outshine the fad of Gero Froggy, as was the case 5 years ago during the events of Steins Gate and Steins Gate Zero. And yet, for some really bizarre reason, Gero Froggy is back in the mainstream, which is kind of weird. Personally, I would rather see an Upa cultural festival than a Gero Froggy cultural festival any day of the week, but that's just me. Now the other one, HikioBot. There we go. A Twitter account followed by over 80% of Hikio students. It's popular for its variety of tweets, which include funny memes, news about discounts at cafes and restaurants near Hikio, school rumors, and other things of interest to the student body. Despite the word bot designating an automated posting program in its name, it doesn't post at regular times, and its posts vary in content, so it's thought to be an actual account run by someone at school. Dun dun dun. I'm sure we'll figure out who that is maybe in due time.
そうそうめっちゃ切なそうなのあれさ文化祭で使うね渋谷復興の歴史の展示なんてどうせ誰も見ねえじゃん
Nobody except a certain newspaper club president by the name of Takuru, that is.
画像だけじゃ弱くない？なんかぬいぐるみとか実際に置かないと。
These two Students are just gossiping there. The male student started to search through Shibuya's stores with a smartphone. He must have found something strange because he kept mumbling, "No way." And there's Itou, lounging around in the student cafeteria. Itou was recording the newspaper club's project for the festival. A bunch of random footage of preparations in the cafeteria.
そんなもんで盛り上がってる場合かっての。
A body had just been found in Donganzaki yesterday, and all these students cared about was their stupid jokes. Yeah, it's just how it is, I'm afraid. The body was found less than 10 minutes away from the school, but they barely even mentioned it.
ま、確かにまだ大掛かりには報道されてないけどさ。
And outside of Takuru, there's no chance of it actually hitting the school notice boards, for a variety of reasons. The first reports had been on a major communication company's website. That was where Itou had seen it. It had been last night, and of course, since neither Shinji nor Kurusu was actually present in the Love Hotel when Takuru and Seruka found the body, it's unlikely that they would actually be interrogated by Shinjo, at least for now. But that might change. It had made the morning news in the morning papers, but all that had been reported was that a body had been found and that no details were known. Shinjo's definitely trying to stop the press from getting the scoop on things. And it was rare for a high school kid to check the TV news and papers every day. Again, rare for anyone except Takuru. There was no word from Miyashiro. Probably still being questioned. And of course, given what he'd witnessed, he's probably still trying to recover his sanity. Itou was really worried about what happened at the Love Hotel, but he had no way of asking about it.
くそ。
But he's gonna try anyway, I think. Took out his phone, even though he knew he hadn't gotten any calls. Sure enough, there were no messages. He'd been doing that a lot since yesterday. I wonder if Takuru and Seruka have actually been released from police questioning. He couldn't bring himself to make a call. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to say to a friend who had been taken away by the police. Like that too, friends, because Seruka was taken away with them. And the gossip continues. The laughing students irritated Itou in a way that he didn't really understand. Yeah, I'm gonna point this out to you, Itou. Even if you do understand, the more you understand, the more irritated you will be. He'd been planning on videotaping the entire cafeteria today, but instead he gave up and left. Yeah, aside from those gossiping students, this place is pretty much Deadsville. Yeah, if by going okay you mean absolutely nothing worth filming, it's not going okay. He went inside the club room and saw that Kurusu was there, who's still trying to put on the facade of the student council president, as usual, I see.
連絡は？
Kurusu's expression clouded for a moment as she shook her head.
あれからは何も。
そっか。
Yeah, that expression on your face there is belying your real emotions. Wakui, the club advisor, told them that Kurusu had taken a change of clothes for Miyashiro to the police station last night. She'd been told that neither Miyashiro nor Inoue were hurt. The police were probably going to let them off with a warning, and if they weren't suffering any after effects from the trauma, they'd be let go in the morning. I surely hope they're not. But school was over, it was almost evening, and there was no word from either of them. Itou dropped into his chair.
ったく、学校のみんなは平和なもんだよ。昨日のことなんてほとんど誰も話してないんだぞ。
そう。
そりゃあ東京じゃ発表されてるだけでほぼ1週間に2人のペースで誰かが殺されてるんだから、変死体があったってだけじゃ別に真新しくもないけどさ。にしたってな、道玄坂なんてもろ近所じゃん。下手したらそこを通って登校してるやつもいるかもしれないってのに。つかいるだろ、うちなら。
On a side note, I get the feeling that Kurusu is trying to behave as if the situation never happened.
あれかな、あいつがいつも言ってるみたいに社会に関するニュースを載せてるサイトとかにアクセスしないやつばっかりなのかな。
Maybe Takuru Miyashiro does have a point.
わかりやすいね。
Define obvious in this context. Kurusu chuckled.
Huh?
Laughed is also a good description
心
there.
配なんでしょ、二人のこと。
Should I take that to mean that you're not? Itou started to speak, but then choked it back. Of course he's worried.
別に副部長こそ心配なんじゃないの。
Ridiculous, she chuckled.
怒ってる。処置なしだもの。セリカはともかくとしてね。忠告も聞かずに突っ込んで無茶するからこんなことになる。伊藤君にも新聞部の文化祭の映像押し付けることになるし。
いや別にそれは大したことないからいいんだけどさ。
ダメ。与えられた役割はきっちりこなすのが当たり前でしょ。
ここか。クルス、予算の件どうなってる？
Oh, it's you again, Kawahara. Kawahara appeared. He was very out of breath.
予算？
超過した予算をまとめたやつ。経理がまだかって。
That is peculiar. Kurusu frowned as she realized her mistake.
ごめん。すぐにメールでまとめて送るから。
Apparently she forgot to send the email.
なるはやで担当の教師が帰っちゃう前に。
Kawahara ran off before Kurusu had the time to answer. Well, thanks. Thank you for nothing. And before he was even out of sight, Kurusu had booted up the PC and started to tap the keys, leaving Shinji Itou, not Shinjo the detective who is elsewhere, leaving Shinji to all to his lonesome.
何？
いや、別に。
Yeah. Shinji has already crossed the line once before, and this time he knows when to stop. Which of us is more obvious? That's what Itou was about to say before he stopped himself. Normally it was impossible to imagine Kurusu not doing her job. For a while after that, Kurusu focused intently on her work. Itou didn't have much else to do, so he watched her. Because basically, yeah, on this particular day, nothing really exciting or notable is happening at Heiko Academy. So there's nothing for the newspaper club to do. For the time being, at least. When he looked carefully, he could see dark spots, small dark spots under her eyes. She probably hadn't slept. And then Itou realized, for the first time, Kurusu had probably come to the club room to see if either of them had contacted him. With all the preparations that were going on, there was no other reason for her to be here.
なんとまあ、あの女帝がね。
Kurusu pressed down hard on the one final key as she finished her task. Again, I'm not really sure why the student council president is also the vice president of a school club. Kind of hard to see how that works. And then suddenly, an unpleasant sound filled the room. Sound of silence. And emptiness.
なあ。
わかってる。
They looked over and saw that Kazuki was nibbling on dried squid as she played her game, oblivious to everything around her. Yeah, she's still here. Itou had seen her come in after Kurusu had started her work. He thought she might say hello, but knowing her, maybe not. He'd also seen her start to play her game. He'd been trying not to bring it up, but that was clearly impossible now. She must have been concentrating pretty hard. Her gaze was constant and steady. Racking up those experience points there, I see. Itou sighed.
こいつはいつでもマイペースだな。他人に興味がないのかね。
Perhaps you're right.
そんなわけないでしょ。この子は他の人よりほんの少しだけ自分が強いの。
I don't think most people would phrase it that way.
にしたってよ。
She's in the same club as them, he started to say, but Kurusu stopped him with a raised hand. Not that she'd actually listen either way since she's wearing her headphones. She looked down at Kazuki's game screen.
そうでもなかったみたい。
Or maybe she's more alert than previously thought. Kurusu chuckled and took off Kazuki's headphones.
和樹、私はゲームやらないから詳しいことはわからないけど。
Seems like Kazuki is upset with Kurusu.
この家の壁に向かって延々と火の玉出してるのは何か意味があるの？すごい勢いで燃え広がってる。
Trying to explain video game logic to a hardcore video gamer like Kazuki isn't going to earn you points there, Kurusu. Hate to break it to you. Yeah. Kazuki looked back at the screen with a stunned expression on her face. She yanked the headphones out of Kurusu's hands and quickly put them on, then started to pound at the keyboard. I think, Kurusu, that Shinji's point has been proven beyond all doubt.
落ち着きなさい。というか、その煩わしいスルメ、飲み込むか出すかしなさい。行儀悪い。
I don't think Kazuki cares either way. Kazuki may or may not have heard her, because she struggled with her game for a while, and then... Oh, she noticed, alright. She froze, like a toy whose batteries had run out. The squid she'd been chewing fell out of her mouth and landed on the desk. She stared at it for almost 30 seconds, as if something impossible had happened. Then she silently stood up, and staggered over to the shelf where we keep the electric coffee maker. Wait, is Itou now... Who is the we in this? Because Takuru isn't here, so why would we be in this sentence? Mind boggles. Her face had turned pale.
和樹、大丈夫か？
I think she wants a caffeine recharge. And she's still not saying a word. Though now that I think about it, her attitude is kind of eerily similar to another student from a different school. But I think I'm overthinking it.
コーヒ
Just
ー
imagining
入れてく
things.
れるのか？
Somehow, I don't think that's what she's doing. Or maybe I'm wrong. Kazuki nodded an answer to Itou's second question and started to make coffee with shaking hands. She made Kurusu her usual, with 2 cubes of sugar, and gave Itou a coffee mix with milk. Then she made a cup for herself, black, but didn't drink a drop. And she's going back to punching that wall. Or maybe not. Her forehead slammed into the desk with a thud, and she became so quiet it was impossible to tell if she was breathing.
ね?
Kurusu looked to Itou for agreement as she cleaned up Kazuki's squid. Also, for some reason, the U in Itou's name has typoed.
いや、そうか？
I think, rather than proving your point, Kurusu, I think this proves Shinji's point, that Kazuki is entirely wrapped up in her own world. He took a sip from his coffee, not sure what to think. To him, none of this made any sense. Doesn't make any sense to me either. Kurusu didn't say another word as she drank her coffee. Itou looked up at the blank ceiling and decided that this was as good a time as any to ask. It wasn't that it was wrong, but it still kind of felt awkward.
あのさ。
何？
あいつがこんなに事件に入れ込んでるのって何か理由があんの？
Well, as they say, the penny drops. Kurusu froze. She lowered her gaze, as if searching for answers in her coffee cup.
伊藤くんこそ、ずいぶん事件に対して熱心じゃない？
That doesn't answer Itou's question, unfortunately there, Kurusu. She seemed to be trying to change the subject. What does this seemed to be? There is no seemed to be in this context.
俺はこういうのが好きな人だから。
Shinji has an excuse. He is actually a fairly dedicated crime otaku. But Takuru's interest in the new generation madness, and by extension the previous new generation madness incidents as well, seems beyond borderline compulsive obsessive.
こういうの？
猟奇的な事件。でも昨日みたいに現場に忍び込むっていうのは。
That was going too far, he continued. And I think Kurusu is in agreement, for once. Kurusu silently took another sip of her coffee. She seemed to be staring at a single point in the distance, lost in thought. It was clear that while she was seeing the things around her, none of them held any meaning to her. Looking at her scared Itou a little. Was it really that big of a deal? Judging from Kurusu's body language, I would say yes.
別に言いたくなければ。
Shinji, of course, trying to give Kurusu an honorable out here.
そういうわけじゃない。きっと基本的には伊藤くんと同じ。タクルも好きだもの、こういうの。
I wonder about that, Kurusu. I really do wonder.
それに、危なっかしいところに首を突っ込みたがるのも昔からだし。
That's so. I see, Itou said.
小学校からだっけ？あいつが副部長と一緒に暮らすようになったの。
Oh dear. Now we're starting to go into a very sensitive subject.
ええ。正確には被災して少し経ってからだから、中学生に上がるか上がらないかの時だけど。
Around the time that the third melt had occurred. Kurusu and Miyashiro were both what people called earthquake orphans. Oh dear. So both their parents perished in the wake of the third melt. They'd both been in 6th grade when they lost their parents to the earthquake. Since they had no relatives to take them in, they'd been sent to the same group home, the localized small-scale children's welfare facility's Aoba dormitory. What an unfortunate thing to have in common. Well, let's see what this welfare facility is about. A small-scale children's welfare facility with a maximum capacity of up to 6 children. Often called group homes, these facilities are often the homes of private individual families and are said to be able to offer more personalized care for the children. Kids like them weren't common in Shibuya these days, but they weren't exactly rare either. A lot of people lost loved ones in the wake of this incident. Miyashiro had been so badly injured during the earthquake that he'd been put into a coma. He was still in that coma when he arrived at the dorms. That's unsettling. The head of the dorm was also the head doctor at the Aoba clinic downstairs, and so for a while that was where he was kept. Kurusu had taken care of literally all his needs. There were 4 kids at the facility. Kurusu and Miyashiro were the oldest. Since her birthday was earlier than his, she dubbed herself the oldest of the 4 siblings, and volunteered to take care of the other 3. Even back then, Miyashiro had a habit of being curious and getting into trouble. But that begs the question, what are the remaining 2 orphans? What happened to them?
だいたい天の弱だしね。みんなとは違うってよく言ってるでしょ。そんなことはないのに。
That might be true in one sense, but then again, she spoke like a parent worried for her child's future.
でも結局あの子は。
But what happened next?
お疲れ様。おや、クルス君も来てたのか。
And the faculty. Of course.
先生、連絡があったんですか？
The club advisor Wakui was quite relaxed as he came into the room. Kurusu quickly stood up and rushed over to him. He nodded and motioned for her to calm down, so apparently Wakui knows something about Takuru's condition, and Serika's.
ついさっきね。
大丈夫そうでしたか？
Should certainly hope so.
それはもちろん。ほら、伊藤君、すぐに体育館に行きなさい。
That's rather rude.
体育館？なんで？
軽音部が今からリハーサルをするって。いい文化祭の記録になるんじゃないかな。
I think the last thing that Shinji wants to be doing right now is filming footage for the culture festival. Kurusu's expression froze. And suddenly it changed.
涌井先生？連絡ってそれですか？
Oh dear. I think Kurusu has that murderous smile in her voice. This isn't gonna end well.
そうだよ。って、 なんだいクルス君、機嫌がいいね。
Oh, Mr. Wakui. You might be a teacher, but you have absolutely no idea what you're getting yourself into. If Takuru were here, he would be bolting for the furthest hills of Japan right about now.
あら、先生には機嫌がいいように見えますか？
Yeah. Shinji, I think you might want to throw yourself out the nearest window for safety's sake.
行ってくる。先生も行こう。
Yeah, you should also leave, Mr. Wakui.
ちょっと。
Sensing a gathering storm of violence, Itou pushed Wakui out the door. Kazuki had looked up, but now she slammed her head back onto the desk. Why do you keep doing that? Why does she keep doing that? Now that she was all alone, Kurusu took out her phone and checked it. It was no message, of course. She sighed and looked at the board, which hasn't changed since yesterday. That incident yesterday at the Love Hotel. Whether it was murder or suicide, from the way Miyashiro and Inoue had looked when they'd been taken away by the police, something had happened. Yeah, it's one thing to look at a crime scene on a television or a photo, but it is quite another thing to actually see one in person in real life. Miyashiro had said it had something to do with the incident 6 years ago. That it does. But any further connections between the two remain unknown for the time being. Now that it had happened 3 times, there was no ignoring it. Just as Takuru had said, Kurusu. He was right, and you were wrong. And that's all there is to say on that. No, it was too dangerous. Just because it's dangerous doesn't mean you're not going to get involved. Because one way or another, that is going to be a fact. Of course, that wouldn't stop Kurusu from trying. She couldn't let him get more involved in this. She thought back to Itou's question about why Miyashiro was so interested in this case. I think you know the real reason. Kazuki was still lying with her head on the desk. When she turned her head to the side, for some reason, she looked like she was enjoying herself. Odd. When Kurusu saw that, she suddenly lost her desire to drink the coffee. Apologizing in her mind to Kazuki, she decided to pour it out at the water fountain. Why are you wasting good coffee? She made good coffee there. A waste. She headed to the upstairs water fountain, which was usually less crowded. She found herself looking down at the gaps between the tiles, as the sound of her footsteps rang in her ears. Hopefully we don't run into Kawahara anytime soon. That's just asking for trouble. She could tell she was walking slower than usual. Essentially, Kurusu was lonely. Still no word from Takuru. She remembered what she said to Miyashiro when he woke up in the clinic.
クルスママ、名前で呼んで。家族なのに名字で呼び合うのはおかしいでしょ。
Of course, she wasn't talking about a clinic in the present, but the orphanage clinic. And yet, for some reason, Takuru broke his promise. In the end, he...
あの子は特別が気取りたいだけなんだから。
She knew why, she supposed. The event had caused them to leave the dorm. The event that had caused him to leave the dorm was still bothering him. What exactly was that? Maybe we might find out. November 7th, 2009. 6 years ago.
なんで携帯が繋がらねえんだよ。
I wanted water. I could still feel the sensation of the dead woman I touched when I'd fallen on my hands, and I wanted to wash it off. I wanted to wash my face too. The wind from the flames had blown something small into my eye, and it itched badly. I was thirsty too. Serika was on my back and showed no signs of waking up. At the very heart of the third melt, my legs were at their limit, so I forced my way through the crowd and sat down on a tire that had rolled nearby. It smelled like burning rubber. I didn't have the energy to apologize to the people I ran into, and they didn't have the energy left to complain. I slowly brought Serika to rest on my knees and looked around. I saw an orange light. The light of the fires reflected off of many things. It was pretty, I thought, before I realized how inappropriate that was. For some reason, I started to count the bodies on the ground, not knowing if they were alive or dead. But in less than 5 seconds, I'd gotten way over 10 and realized how futile it was. I stopped. Yeah, there were definitely a lot of casualties. Well over 300. Shibuya Station was utterly destroyed. That it was. The 107, only a few minutes away by foot, was ruined as well. 5 whole hours after the earthquake, the chaos had only increased. There were fewer people out walking, but I wasn't sure if that was because they had reached safety or simply collapsed from exhaustion. I saw someone carrying his own severed arm in a convenience store bag. Yeesh. I saw people ignore a barefoot woman as she cradled a baby whose head was smashed in. Some had outright given up on sanity and were flinging things into the fire. A group of middle-aged salarymen were dragging a young girl into the darkness. A young man went to join them. That's unsettling.
地獄だ。
Not quite Gehenna, but close enough. There was no other way to describe it. This was hell. And Serica is regaining consciousness. Serica moaned a little in my lap. I slapped her cheeks to wake her up.
尾上、尾上。
Her face distorted in agony. It was okay. She was breathing. She was okay.
これから代々木に向かうから。ほら、あの大きい総合病院。覚えてるだろう。昔冒険しに忍び込んだあそこだよ。
You know, that probably wasn't a good idea on your part there, Takuru. And in this situation, the general hospital is the last place you will want to find shelter in right now. Trust me on that. Instead of answering, she just moved her eyebrows a little. Maybe she suffered a concussion. I swore and lifted her up on my back again. She didn't seem to be that badly hurt, but this kept happening. Yes. I read on Twitter that the General Hospital of Yoyogi Station was accepting patients injured in the earthquake. I didn't know if it was true, but I had no choice but to go. Had to be better than the hell that was Shibuya. Maybe, maybe not.
死ぬなよ。
Takuru and Serica have nowhere else left to go, so why not? I yelled, unsure if Serica could even hear me, and started walking. I just needed to get to the hospital. What the? That was foreboding. Okay. Didn't get a good glimpse of that myself, but I leapt up. I quickly glanced to the left and right as I tried to calm my racing heart. I saw that I was in my own bed. Well, Takuru's back in his RV, back in the present. 2015. Reality. Which, in all honesty, is probably a good place to end this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Child. And when we return, adventurers, only time will tell whether Takuru can finally come to grips with the ghosts of his own past of 6 years ago. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.